hotel rooftop return home, key events, emotional breakthrough, confronting the past, choosing courage over fear, new beginning themes, self-worth, healing, taking chances, authentic connection. Part 1. The Shattered Spotlight. Some moments crack your world open before you can catch your breath. For Natalie Pierce, that moment arrived on a Friday night when the stadium lights felt warm. The music pulsed through her veins, and the diamond on her finger caught every flash of color from the stage. She thought she was living her happiest chapter. She was wrong. The band had been her favorite since college. Jordan had surprised her with tickets 3 weeks ago, right after their engagement party. He squeezed her hand during the opening song, and she felt grateful, genuinely grateful for this man who seemed to know exactly what would make her smile. The crowd swayed as one living thing, thousands of hearts beating to the same rhythm. Then came the kiss cam. Natalie loved watching couples on the big screen. The shy ones who blushed, the bold ones who made everyone cheer. She nudged Jordan playfully when an elderly couple kissed sweetly, their wrinkled hands intertwined. But Jordan had wandered off 10 minutes earlier, claiming he needed the restroom. She waited, phone in her lap, watching the screen cycle through more couples. That's when time stopped. The camera landed on 2 people kissing passionately in the upper section. The woman had dark red hair, her hands cupping his face, and the man wore the exact same navy jacket Jordan had been wearing all evening. Same build, same watch, same everything, because it was Jordan. The stadium erupted in applause. 5,000 people celebrating her humiliation. Natalie's vision blurred. Her hands went numb. She stood so abruptly that her purse tumbled to the concrete floor, contents scattering. Nobody noticed. They were too busy cheering for true love. She moved on instinct, pushing past strangers, their faces blending into one meaningless smear. The exit sign glowed red like an emergency beacon. Her heels clicked frantically against the concrete ramp. She burst through the doors into the parking lot, the cold October air hitting her face like a wake-up call she'd never asked for. Her chest heaved. She couldn't cry yet. The shock was too fresh, too raw. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to push the image away, but it stayed burned into her mind. Jordan, another woman. A kiss that looked practiced, comfortable, real. How long had this been happening? Footsteps approached from behind. Heavy, measured, purposeful. She spun around, expecting Jordan with some pathetic excuse ready. Instead, she found someone entirely different. Dominic Hayes stood there in a charcoal suit, no tie, top button undone. Her boss, the man who ran board meetings like military operations and rarely spoke more than necessary. His dark eyes held something she had never seen before. "Concern, Natalie," he said quietly. His voice cut through the noise, still echoing from inside the arena. Double quotes, Mr. Hayes. She tried to straighten up, tried to look professional, but her voice cracked. "What are you doing here? I have season passes. 3rd row." He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "I saw what happened on the screen." Fresh humiliation washed over her. "Of course you did." Everyone did. "I'm sorry," he said it simply, without pity. Just honest regret that she had to experience that. Natalie wrapped her arms around herself. The engagement ring suddenly felt heavy, foreign. "I must look ridiculous right now." "You look hurt." Dominic pulled off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders without asking permission. It smelled like cedar and something expensive, and you have every right to be. She wanted to argue, to say she was fine, but the kindness in his gesture broke something loose inside her. A sob escaped before she could stop it, then another. Then she was crying openly, one hand covering her mouth, the other clutching his jacket. Dominic didn't move away. He didn't offer empty platitudes or tell her everything would be okay. He just stood there, solid and present, like an anchor in a storm. Minutes passed. The music from inside the arena thumped faintly in the background. When Natalie finally caught her breath, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I thought he loved me," she whispered. "He should have." Dominic's jaw tightened. "That's his failure, not yours." Her phone buzzed. Jordan's name flashed on the screen. She stared at it, paralyzed. Dominic reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took the phone from her hand. He declined the call and handed it back. "You don't owe him anything tonight. Not your time, not your words, not your tears. Something about the way he said it made her believe him. They stood in silence for a moment, the parking lot stretching around them like neutral territory. Natalie pulled his jacket tighter around her shoulders. How am I supposed to face everyone at work on Monday? The question came out small, defeated. Dominic met her eyes directly with your head up. This doesn't define you, Natalie. And anyone who thinks less of you because someone else betrayed you isn't worth your concern. She had worked for Dominic Hayes for 2 years. She had organized his calendar, managed his meetings, and watched him command boardrooms with quiet authority. But she had never really seen him until this moment. Not the CEO, not the boss, just a person who understood what it meant to have your world collapse in public. Thank you, she said softly, for not pretending this isn't awful. It is awful. He nodded toward the parking garage. Can I give you a ride home? You shouldn't drive right now. Natalie hesitated, then nodded. She didn't trust herself behind the wheel anyway. As they walked toward his car, she slipped the engagement ring off her finger and dropped it into her purse. It made a small final sound when it hit the bottom. Neither of them spoke during the drive. Odd, but somehow the silence felt safe. When Dominic pulled up outside her apartment building, he waited until she was safely inside before driving away. Natalie stood in her living room, still wearing his jacket, and realized something had shifted. The night had shattered her, yes, but in the rubble something unexpected had appeared. Not a rescue, not a rebound, just a person who saw her pain and didn't look away. Monday morning would come eventually, but for now, she let herself feel everything. The betrayal, humiliation, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of something she couldn't name yet. Something that felt a little bit like hope. Monday arrived wearing the face of dread. Natalie stood in front of her bathroom mirror longer than usual, concealer working overtime to hide the evidence of a weekend spent crying. She chose a navy blazer and cream blouse, something that said professional, not broken. The apartment felt too quiet without Jordan's things scattered around. He had come by Saturday while she was at her mother's house and collected his belongings. The only thing he left behind was a note she refused to read. The office buzzed with its usual Monday energy. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, coffee machines hissed. Natalie kept her eyes forward as she walked to her desk just outside Dominic's office. A few co-workers glanced her way, but no one said anything. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they were being kind. She wasn't sure which option was worse. She had just powered on her computer when Dominic's door opened. "Natalie, do you have a moment?" His voice was steady, professional, exactly what she needed. She grabbed her tablet and followed him inside. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, gray clouds promising rain. Dominic closed the door and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "How are you holding up?" "I'm here." "That counts for something." G managed a small smile. He sat on the edge of his desk rather than behind it, making the space feel less formal. "I want to propose something, and I need you to know this isn't about what happened Friday night." "I've been planning this for weeks." Natalie straightened, curiosity cutting through her exhaustion. "I have a series of meetings in Europe, Barcelona, Vienna, and Amsterdam. Days. I need someone who understands how I work, who can manage the logistics and keep everything running smoothly." He paused. "I want you to come with me." Her breath caught. "Me? You've been handling my schedule for 2 years. You anticipate problems before they happen. You're exactly who I need for this." Pulled a folder from his desk and handed it to her. "All expenses covered. Private accommodations. And honestly, I think getting out of this city might do you some good." Natalie opened the folder, her eyes scanning itineraries, hotel reservations, and meeting agendas. Barcelona in 3 days. It was real. "I don't want your pity," she said carefully. "You don't have it." Dominic's expression remained neutral. "But I am offering you a choice. This trip is about work. What it means beyond that is up to you." She thought about her empty apartment, the pitying looks from friends, the inevitable run-ins with Jordan around the city. Then she thought about cobblestone streets she'd never walked, conversations in languages she didn't speak, and the possibility of being someone other than the girl who got humiliated at a concert. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Thursday morning, 6 a.m. Natalie closed the folder and met his eyes. "I'll be ready." Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. Pack something nice for the evenings. Some of these events have formal components. She nodded and stood to leave. At the door she paused. Mr. Hayes. Dominic, he corrected quietly. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. I think we can drop the formality. Dominic, she tested the name on her tongue. Thank you for this opportunity. You've earned it, Natalie. Remember that. The 3 days before departure passed in a blur of preparation. Natalie coordinated with international contacts, confirmed reservations, packed her suitcase 3 different times before settling on a wardrobe that felt both professional and adventurous. Her mother called twice, worried about her traveling so soon after the breakup. Her best friend Rachel called it destiny and told her to buy new lingerie just in case. Natalie rolled her eyes but bought a new dress anyway. Thursday morning came wrapped in pre-dawn darkness. The car service arrived at 5:30, and Natalie watched her neighborhood disappear through the tinted windows. At the private airport, Dominic was already waiting, looking unfairly put together in dark jeans and a fitted black sweater. She had never seen him in anything but suits. "Ready?" he asked, taking her carry-on bag. "As I'll ever be." The private jet was everything she'd imagined and nothing she'd expected. Leather seats, polished wood, and windows that made the world feel close enough to touch. A flight attendant offered champagne, but Natalie opted for coffee, needing to feel grounded. Dominic settled into the seat across from her as the jet taxied down the runway. Once they were airborne, he pulled out his laptop but didn't open it. "First international trip?" he asked. "That obvious? You keep looking out the window like the clouds might disappear. Jordan always talked about traveling, but we never did. There was always some excuse. Work, money, timing. Some people talk about life, others live it." Dominic leaned back. "Which one do you want to be?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. "I'm still figuring that out," she admitted. They'd talked for hours. Not about work, but about everything else. He told her about growing up in boarding schools, learning early that showing emotion was a liability. She told him about her father leaving when she was 12, how her mother worked 2 jobs to keep their apartment. He asked about her dreams beyond being an executive assistant. She confessed she'd always wanted to write, maybe start a blog about travel and food, but it seemed frivolous. "Nothing that makes you happy is frivolous," he said. Barcelona greeted them with golden sunlight and warm Mediterranean air. The hotel was elegant, all marble and fresh flowers. Natalie's room had a balcony overlooking narrow streets filled with people living loudly. Joyfully that first evening, after a successful meeting with potential investors, Dominic knocked on her door. "Dinner," he offered. "There's a place near the Gothic Quarter I think you'd like." She changed into the new dress, a deep emerald that made her feel bolder than she was, and met him in the lobby. They walked through winding streets, past street musicians and artists selling paintings. The restaurant was small, tucked away, the kind of place only locals knew about, over wine and tapas. The conversation flowed easier than it should have between a boss and his assistant. He asked questions that required real answers. She found herself sharing stories she'd never told anyone. And when he laughed at something, she said, "Really laughed." She realized she'd never heard that sound before. "Can I ask you something personal?" Natalie said as they shared the last of the patatas bras. "You can ask." "I might not answer. Why aren't you married or with someone?" She immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that's too personal." Dominic swirled his wine glass. "Considering I was engaged once, 7 years ago, she worked in finance. Brilliant mind understood my world. But a week before the wedding, I found out she'd been feeding confidential information to a competitor. Everything was strategy to her, including me. I'm sorry. Won't be. It taught me that not everyone has good intentions, even when they're sleeping next to you. You met her eyes. I've kept my distance since then. Easier to control what doesn't get close." Natalie understood that more than he knew. They walked back slowly, the Barcelona night alive around them. When they reached her hotel room door, she turned to him. "I had a really good time tonight." "So did I." He hesitated, something unspoken passing between them. "Natalie, I need you to know something. What I said about this trip being planned already, that was true. But asking you specifically, wanting you here with me, that wasn't just about work." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What was it about?" "I don't know yet." His honesty was disarming. But I think we're both trying to figure out what happens when the script changes. She stepped closer, close enough to catch the scent of his cologne. I'm terrified of making another mistake. Then we'll be terrified together. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. I'm not him, Natalie. I won't pretend to be perfect, but I won't make you feel small either. The air between them crackled with possibility. But instead of kissing him, she did something braver. She took his hand and squeezed it gently. Let's take this slow, she whispered. I need slow right now. Dominic nodded, relief and something deeper flickering in his eyes. Slow works for me. He left her at her door, and Natalie stood there long after he was gone, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she needed to be. Vienna arrived dressed in autumn gold. The trees lining the streets looked like they'd been dipped in honey. The air carried the scent of coffee and fresh pastries from every corner. Natalie had never seen a city that felt so alive with history, and yet so present in its beauty. They had been traveling together for a week now. Something had shifted between them. Something neither could name but both could feel. The meetings in Vienna were intense. Dominic negotiated contracts with precision, his mind moving 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. Natalie took notes, managed schedules, and found herself admiring not just his business acumen, but the way he treated people. He remembered names, asked about families, and never made anyone feel less than. This wasn't the cold CEO she'd worked for from a distance. This was someone completely different. Or maybe this was who he'd always been when the armor came off. On their 3rd evening in Vienna, after a particularly grueling day of presentations, Dominic suggested they skip the formal dinner reception. I think we've earned a night off, he said, as they walked out of the conference center. Have you ever been to Prater? I don't even know what that is, he smiled. The kind that reached his eyes. Then we're going. Prater turned out to be an amusement park, old-fashioned and charming, with a giant Ferris wheel that had been turning since 1897. Natalie laughed when she realized where they were headed. You want to ride the Ferris wheel? When's the last time you did something just because it sounded fun? Dominic challenged. She couldn't remember. That realization stung a little. They bought tickets and climbed into one of the enclosed red gondolas as the wheel lifted them slowly above the city. Vienna spread out beneath them like a painting, all glowing lights and distant music. Natalie pressed her hands against the window, childlike wonder replacing her usual caution. It's beautiful, she breathed. It is. But when she turned, Dominic was looking at her, not the view. Her breath caught. The space in the gondola suddenly felt smaller, more intimate. The wheel creaked gently as it climbed higher. Natalie? He started, then stopped, seeming to struggle with something. This past week has been difficult for me. Her stomach dropped. The meetings? No. He ran a hand through his hair. A rare gesture of uncertainty. Being around you, trying to keep this professional when everything in me wants something different. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel her heart racing. I know the timing is terrible, he continued. You're healing from something painful. I'm your boss, which complicates everything. And maybe I'm completely misreading this, but I hope that you feel it too. The Ferris wheel reached the top and paused, leaving them suspended between earth and sky. I feel it, Natalie whispered. I've been feeling it since that night in the parking lot. Maybe even before. In all those moments, I didn't let myself notice. Dominic moved closer, his hand finding hers. I don't want to be your rebound, and I don't want you to feel pressured because I'm your employer. If this is just gratitude or loneliness, tell me now. She shook her head firmly. It's not Jordan leaving hurt, but not because I lost him. It hurt because it made me realize I'd settled for someone who never truly saw me. But you, her voice grew stronger. You see me, Dominic, you ask questions and actually listen to the answers. You challenge me to want more for myself. That's not gratitude. That's not loneliness. That's real. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I haven't let anyone close in 7 years. Not really close. The idea of it terrifies me. Good, she said softly. I'm terrified too, but I'm more afraid of walking away from something that could matter. 'Cause the timing isn't perfect, or the situation isn't simple. The Ferris wheel began its descent, but neither of them noticed. "If we do this," Dominic said carefully, "everything changes. At work, in our lives, people will talk. They'll say you got the job because of this or that. I'm taking advantage. It won't be easy. I don't need easy." Natalie squeezed his hand. "I need honest. I need someone who won't make me smaller to make themselves bigger." "Can you give me that?" "Yes." The word came out fierce. "Certain. I can give you that and more. I can give you patience while you heal. I can give you space when you need it, and presents when you don't. I can give you late-night conversations and stupid jokes, and someone who will never, ever make you doubt your worth." Tears pricked her eyes, but they were good tears. Healing tears. "Then let's try. Let's be terrified together and see what happens." "Oh." The gondola reached the bottom and the attendant opened the door, but they sat there a moment longer, hands intertwined. Both of them understanding that they'd just crossed a threshold couldn't uncross. When they finally stepped out into the Vienna night, Dominic didn't let go of her hand. They walked through the park, past families and couples and groups of friends, just a people learning how to be brave together. Later, they found a quiet wine bar tucked into a cobblestone alley. The bartender spoke only German, but somehow they managed to order. They sat close, knees touching under the small table, and talked about everything they'd never said before. "My mother's going to love you," Natalie said, surprising herself. "Why is that?" "Because you make me laugh, and because you don't try to fix me, you just let me be messy and human." Dominic's expression softened. "You make me want to be more than just work and strategy. You make me remember what it feels like to look forward to tomorrow." The wine bar was closing when they finally left. They walked back to the hotel through streets that had gone quiet, the city settling in to sleep around them. At Natalie's door, Dominic stopped. "I should let you rest," he said. Though his body language suggested leaving was the last thing he wanted. Natalie stepped closer, her heart pounding but her mind clear. "Dominic, yes, kiss me." He didn't need to be asked twice. His hand cupped her face gently, giving her every chance to change her mind. And then his lips met hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape of this new thing between them. But then it deepened, became something more urgent, more real. It tasted like wine and promises, and the kind of beginning that felt inevitable. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Natalie rested her forehead against his. "Stay," she whispered. "Not for anything except more of this. More talking. More learning who we are when we're just us." Dominic searched her eyes. "Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything." They spent the night talking, curled up on her hotel room couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. They talked about childhood dreams and adult disappointments, about the things that scared them, and the things that made them hope. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, they fell asleep like that, tangled together, peaceful. When Natalie woke to Vienna's sunlight streaming through the windows, Dominic was already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning," she smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "No regrets. Not a single one." He kissed her forehead. "Though we should probably talk about how we're going to handle this when we get back." Reality crept in, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt manageable. "We'll figure it out," Natalie said with confidence. She was still growing into together. The rest of their trip passed like a dream. They finished the meetings in Vienna, flew to Amsterdam for the final consultations, and somewhere between business negotiations and stolen kisses in museum corridors, they built something that felt solid, something that felt real. On the flight home, Natalie looked out at the clouds and realized she wasn't the same woman who'd boarded this jet 10 days ago. That woman had been broken, unsure, afraid to take up space. This woman, the one flying home beside someone who saw her completely, was different. She was stronger, braver, ready. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked, his fingers interlaced with hers. "That sometimes the worst moments lead us exactly where we need to be." She turned to him. "I wouldn't have chosen what happened with Jordan, but I'd choose this. I'd choose you every single time." He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. "I spent 7 years building walls. You walked through them like they were made of paper." "Maybe they were," she said. Maybe we were both just waiting for someone worth being vulnerable for. When they landed, reality was waiting. There would be conversations with HR, careful navigation of office dynamics, and inevitable gossip. But Natalie had learned something crucial on this trip. She had learned that she was stronger than her circumstances, braver than her fears, and worthy of someone who loved her not despite her imperfections, but because of them. 3 months later, she would start her travel blog. 6 months later, Dominic would step down as her direct supervisor to eliminate any conflict of interest, promoting her to a lateral role with more responsibility. A year later, they would still be together, still learning each other, still choosing courage over comfort. But all of that was still to come. For now, in the arrivals terminal, with their luggage and jet lag and hearts full of possibility, they were simply two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their broken pieces and decided to build something beautiful. Natalie's phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "How was Europe? Did you fall in love with the cities?"